My husband dumped me 37 miles from home, out in the rain. He said I needed a lesson. I didn't argue, I just watched him drive away. A black truck rolled up, and moments later my bodyguard stepped out. Command ready. I smiled as I climbed in. His cruelty had finally hit its limit. This was his last mistake. I had already pressed record on my phone and slipped it back into my pocket when Andrew's Mercedes pulled into the empty rest stop. The rain hadn't started yet. But I could smell it in the air. Get out, he ordered without even killing the engine. You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might remind you to show some respect. He had calculated it perfectly. 37 miles, too far for an Uber, too remote for public transport. What he didn't realize was that I'd been recording him for 8 months, and Marcus was parked behind the abandoned gas station waiting for my signal. The leather seat creaked as I turned to face him. Andrew's jaw was locked in that cold, familiar way he used whenever he closed some ruthless hedge fund deal. 3 hours earlier we'd been at Morton's Steakhouse celebrating our anniversary. Now he was leaving me on a deserted highway because I dared to ask why $10,000 had vanished from our joint account. You're really doing this? I kept my voice steady, letting the phone catch every word. Actions have consequences. Amanda, you went behind my back, called my accountant. Embarrassed me with your paranoid questions. Maybe a long walk in the rain will remind you who controls the money in this family. I thought about the pearl earring in my jewelry box at home. The matching one I'd found under our bed 2 days ago. $10,000 had probably bought her something sparkly. I didn't mention it, not yet. Marcus and I had rehearsed the order of events, and timing mattered. It's going to storm, I said, nodding at the darkening sky. Then you'd better start walking. His fingers tapped the steering wheel. Unless you want to apologize right now and admit you were wrong. 6 months ago, I might have caved. 6 months ago, I still believed our marriage could be saved, but that was before I found the second set of books at his company. Before the strange withdrawals, before I discovered he'd been shifting our assets into accounts only he controlled. The moment I started asking questions, he turned vicious. Tonight was his escalation, but it would also be his undoing. I'll walk, I said, opening the door. Smart choice. Maybe by the time you get home, you'll remember your place. I stepped out onto the cracked asphalt. The rest stop had been abandoned for years. Just a boarded-up building surrounded by weeds breaking through the pavement. Andrew had picked it precisely because of its isolation. He'd even mentioned it last week as we drove by. Imagine being stranded here, miles from anywhere. That's when I realized what he was planning. I saw him glance at his phone, probably texting someone that the job was done. Then he drove off, tires squealing slightly as he disappeared into the dark. I counted to 60, watching his taillights vanish around the bend. Then I walked calmly toward the gas station. Marcus stepped out from the shadows, holding an umbrella and a thermos of coffee. Did you get everything? He asked. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. He actually told me I need to remember my place. Marcus shook his head. 3 years of him controlling you was bad enough. But this, he gestured at the empty lot. This is criminal abandonment. Rebecca is going to have a field day with this recording. I took the coffee. The warmth spreading through my fingers just as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. By morning, Andrew would believe I'd spent the night trudging through a storm, broken and humiliated. He'd expect to find me huddled on our doorstep, begging forgiveness. Valentina ready? I asked. She's been monitoring his accounts all night. The second he moved that $10,000 this afternoon, she documented it. The forensic audit goes back 2 years. He's been funneling money offshore. Probably planning to dump you once he had enough hidden. Rebecca's filing emergency papers at 9. Marcus continued. Abandonment, financial abuse, fraud. With tonight's recording on top of everything else, he won't know what hit him. We climbed into Marcus's truck just as the sky split open, rain hammering the windshield. I pictured Andrew driving home, smug about his so-called lesson, maybe pouring himself a scotch to celebrate putting his wife in her place. What he didn't know was that 8 months ago, the moment he started hiding money, I'd hired my own team. Marcus had wired our house with hidden cameras under the guise of security upgrades. Valentina, a forensic accountant who specialized in financial abuse cases, had tracked every penny, and Rebecca, one of the city's most ruthless divorce attorneys, had built a case that now filled 3 boxes. "The house recordings uploaded fine," Marcus said, checking his phone. "We've even got him on camera last Tuesday bringing her over while you were at your mom's. They used your bed." Something cold settled in my chest, not heartbreak, that had burned out months ago. This was resolution, hard and final. "He's been planning this a while," I said. "The escalation, the money control, cutting me off from friends, classic abuse. Rebecca says judges don't look kindly on husbands who abandon their wives as punishment." Marcus drove carefully through the storm, sticking to backroads to make sure Andrew wouldn't spot us. We'd planned this weeks ago, down to every detail. Even running practice drills. The hotel room had been booked under my maiden name, paid for in cash. Marcus had withdrawn the money slowly over 2 months. The clothes I'd need were already waiting there, along with copies of every piece of documentation. "You know he's going to come looking for you when you don't show up tonight," Marcus said. "Let him," I replied. The hotel security cameras would catch me checking in alone, drenched and shaken. The front desk clerk would later testify that I could barely get words out through my tears. Rebecca had coached me on exactly what to say and how to act. The rain hammered harder as we neared the city. By now Andrew was probably at home, on his second drink. Maybe even calling Nadia to brag about teaching me a lesson. He'd go to bed smug, believing he'd put me in my place. Tomorrow morning, though, he'd wake up to find his assets frozen, his office sealed, and federal investigators asking about the discrepancies Valentina had uncovered in his hedge fund's books. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked. As the hotel came into view, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, independent, successful, before Andrew had slowly dismantled my life. I thought about the recording on my phone, his cold voice telling me to get out and walk 37 miles in a storm. I thought about the empty bank accounts, the printer hidden in his office, the plan that would have left me with nothing. "I've been ready for 8 months, I told Marcus. Tonight he gave me the final piece of evidence I needed. Marcus pulled up at the side entrance. I grabbed the small bag we'd prepared, just enough to make it look like I'd escaped with nothing, and stepped out into the rain. Now it was time to play the role of the traumatized wife, abandoned and afraid. Tomorrow Andrew would learn who really needed the lesson. The hotel lobby was blindingly bright after the storm outside. Water dripped from my hair onto the marble floor as I approached the front desk, my hands trembling just enough to be convincing. The night clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, immediately grabbed a stack of towels. "Oh my goodness, are you all right?" She hurried around the counter, wrapping one around my shoulders. "My husband." I let my voice crack. "He left me at a rest stop in the storm. I had to walk for miles before someone helped me." Her expression shifted from concern to horror. "Perfect." Every word would go into the incident report, exactly as Rebecca had instructed. The clerk guided me to a chair, brought me hot tea, and processed my check-in. I gave her my maiden name, Amanda Harrison, and paid with the emergency credit card I'd opened 6 months ago, the one Andrew knew nothing about. Room 412 was small but clean, overlooking the city lights blurred by rain. I locked the door, slid the chain across, and finally let myself breathe. Then I pulled out my second phone, the one Marcus had given me, and replayed the recording from the car. Andrew's voice filled the room, cold and deliberate. "You think you're so clever, don't you, calling my accountant behind my back, asking questions about our finances as if you'd even understand the answers." My own voice was steady, controlled. "It's our money, Andrew. I have a right to know where it's going." His laugh was sharp. "I earn it, I manage it. You waste it on overpriced groceries and those ridiculous charity lunches. $70 for organic vegetables. Last week, Amanda, $70. I remembered that trip. I'd bought ingredients for the dinner party he insisted on hosting for his clients. The same dinner where he dropped $800 on wine without blinking." The recording went on. "You embarrassed me at the Morrisons' party, contradicting me about European markets in front of my colleagues. Where did you even get those opinions? Some morning talk show. I have an MBA from Northwestern, Amanda, and I worked in financial services for 5 years before we met." I reminded him on the tape. "Analyzing penny stocks at a third-tier firm. He sneered. I gave you a life you never could have achieved on your own. I closed my eyes, remembering Henderson Investments. I hadn't been analyzing penny stocks, I'd been managing a $30 million portfolio, but Andrew had rewritten history so many times that sometimes even I lost track of the truth. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Valentina found something, 3 more accounts in the Caimans. He'd been moving money for 18 months. I traced it back in my mind, 18 months ago. The separate tax accounts, the sudden new financial advisor, the documents he told me to sign without reading. Trust me, Amanda. Just routine stuff. Another text came in, this one from Rebecca. Judge Callan agreed to an emergency hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring the recording. Judge Patricia Callan had a reputation for seeing through men like Andrew. In the past year alone, she'd presided over 3 high-profile financial abuse cases, all ending in the wife's favor. Rebecca had timed this perfectly. I changed into the dry clothes from the emergency bag I'd stashed here yesterday, then sat at the small desk. Instead of drafting the official statement Rebecca would polish for court, I started writing notes for myself. Reminders of who I really was beneath the version Andrew had tried to create. I wrote about the promotion I'd turned down because he claimed the travel would strain our marriage. The investment I'd identified that could have tripled my personal savings, if I'd still had any personal savings. The friendship with my college roommate that ended when Andrew convinced me she was jealous of our happiness. My phone rang, Andrew's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail, then played it back on speaker while recording it with my second phone. Amanda, this is ridiculous. It's been 3 hours. The lesson's been learned. Okay, call me back and I'll come get you. Don't make this worse than it needs to be. 10 minutes later, another call. His tone was harder now. I know you have your phone. Stop being childish. Call me back, if you're trying to worry me. It's not working. I'm going to bed. You can find your own way home. But I could hear it. The edge creeping into his voice. He was starting to realize something was wrong. I'd always called back by now, always apologized, always crawled home. The silence was cracking his script. Just past midnight, Nadia called. I almost didn't recognize the number, but instinct made me answer and stay silent. Hello, Amanda, her voice wavered. Andrew asked me to call you. He's worried. He said you two had a fight and you're not answering his calls. Marcus drove carefully through the storm, taking back roads so Andrew couldn't spot us. We'd planned this weeks ago, down to practice runs. The hotel room was booked in my maiden name and paid for in cash. Marcus had withdrawn the funds gradually over 2 months. The clothes I'd need were waiting there, along with copies of every document we'd prepared. You know he's going to come looking for you when you don't show up, Marcus said. Let him, I answered. The hotel security cameras would show me checking in alone, soaked and shaken. The front desk clerk would later swear I could barely speak through my tears. Rebecca had coached me on exactly what to say and how to act. Rain hammered harder as we approached the city. By now Andrew was probably home, on his second drink, maybe calling Nadia to brag about teaching me a lesson. He'd go to bed smug, expecting me broken on the doorstep. Tomorrow morning, though, he'd find his assets frozen, his office sealed, and federal investigators asking about the discrepancies Valentina had found in his hedge fund books. Ready? Marcus asked as the hotel came into view. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years earlier, independent, successful. Before Andrew chipped away at my life, I thought about the recording on my phone. His cold voice telling me to get out and walk 37 miles in a storm. I thought about the empty accounts, the hidden printer in his office, everything that would have left me with nothing. I'd been preparing for 8 months. Tonight he'd handed me the final piece of evidence. Marcus pulled up at the side entrance. I grabbed the small bag we'd packed, just enough to make it look like I'd fled with nothing, and stepped into the rain. It was time to play the role of the abandoned, traumatized wife. Tomorrow Andrew would learn who was really giving the lessons. The hotel lobby felt impossibly bright after the darkness outside. Water dripped from my hair onto the marble floor as I approached the front desk, my hands trembling just enough to be convincing. A young clerk with kind eyes rushed for towels. "Oh my goodness, are you all right?" she asked, wrapping one around my shoulders. "My husband," I let my voice crack. "He left me at a rest stop in the storm. I had to walk for miles before someone helped me. Her face shifted from concern to horror. Perfect, every detail would go into the incident report, exactly as Rebecca had instructed. The clerk guided me to a chair, brought hot tea, and checked me in. I gave my maiden name, Amanda Harrison, and paid with the emergency card I'd opened 6 months earlier. The one Andrew didn't know about. Room 412 was small but clean, the city lights blurred by rain. I locked the door, slid the chain, and finally breathed. Then I took out my second phone, the one Marcus supplied, and replayed the car recording. Andrew's voice filled the room. "You think you're so clever, calling my accountant behind my back, asking about our finances like you'd understand the answers." My voice on tape was steady. "It's our money, Andrew, I have a right to know where it's going." He scoffed. "I earn it, I manage it. You waste it on overpriced groceries and those ridiculous charity lunches. $70 for organic vegetables." I remembered that shopping trip and the dinner party he'd hosted where he dropped $800 on wine without blinking. On tape he kept taunting, "You embarrassed me at the Morrisons party," contradicting me about European markets in front of my colleagues. "Where did you even get those opinions? And I worked in financial services for 5 years before we met." I said into the recording, "I managed portfolios, Andrew, real ones." He'd rewritten our history so often that sometimes even I doubted myself. Then a text from Marcus, "Valentina found something. 3 more accounts in the Caimans, 18 months. He'd been moving money for 18 months. I traced the pattern back. Separate tax accounts, the sudden advisor who appeared out of nowhere, the documents he'd asked me to sign without reading. "Trust me," he'd said, "routine stuff." Another message. "Rebecca, Judge Callan agreed to an emergency hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring the recording." Judge Patricia Callan had a track record of seeing through men like Andrew. Rebecca had timed this perfectly. I changed into the dry clothes from the emergency kit I'd stashed the day before and sat at the small desk. Instead of drafting the polished court statement Rebecca would finalize, I wrote notes to myself, reminders of who I'd been before Andrew tried to erase me. I listed the promotion I'd declined because he said the travel would ruin our marriage, the investment that would have tripled my savings, friendships he'd poisoned. My phone rang. Andrew's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail and played it back on speaker while recording it with the second phone. "Amanda, this is ridiculous. It's been 3 hours. The lesson's been learned. Call me back and I'll come get you. Don't make this worse than it needs to be." 10 minutes later his voice was harder. "I know you have your phone. Stop being childish. Call me back. I'm going to bed. Find your own way home." You could hear the edge now. He was beginning to realize something was wrong. I always answered by then. I always apologized. The silence was breaking his script. Shortly after midnight Nadia called. I almost didn't recognize the number, but I answered and stayed silent. "Hello, Amanda." Her voice trembled. "Andrew asked me to call. He's worried. He said you two had a fight and you're not answering." By 1 in the morning I'd hung up and let the calls come in every 15 minutes. Andrew, his mother Margaret, even his business partner James. I documented each call, numbers, times, frantic messages. The abandoned wife was supposed to be desperate for rescue, not radio silent. I ordered room service, charged it to the emergency card, a super salad and a glass of wine. Let the receipt prove I wasn't falling apart the way Andrew expected. A text from Mrs. Chen made me smile. She'd seen Andrew in his driveway with a flashlight, checking under his car, then drive off fast. He was looking for my car, not knowing Marcus had moved it to a long-term garage across town 2 days earlier. Another piece of evidence that I'd planned to leave. His punishment had only accelerated my timetable. I pulled the curtains aside and watched the storm roar over the city. Somewhere out there, Andrew's carefully controlled world was starting to slip. He thought he'd taught me a lesson about power and place. Tomorrow, when markets opened, he'd discover his offshore accounts frozen and his key card failing at the office. When federal agents showed up with Valentina's findings, he'd learn who was really in control. Rain hammered the windows. As if trying to break through 8 months of planning, documenting, and pretending to be the subdued wife while building a case to destroy him, I set my alarm for 7 and slept with relief. I'd need to look convincingly distraught for the emergency hearing. Rebecca would meet me at noon to prep. By dawn I'd been awake since 5, hunched at the desk with my laptop open to our joint checking account. At 6:47 a.m., Andrew moved another 20,000. Panic. Hiding assets at the last minute. Too late. Valentina had already documented it. By noon my hotel suite had turned into a command center. Valentina arrived first, hauling 2 suitcases full of printed bank statements, wire records, and falsified tax documents, each stack labeled and color-coded. The Cayman accounts are frozen as of 9 this morning, she said, pulling up a spreadsheet. He tried 3 times at dawn to access them. He's probably in his office tearing it apart. Rebecca came in next, phone to her ear delivering rapid-fire legal orders. She ended the call and looked at me with grim satisfaction. Judge Coleman moved our hearing to 1 o'clock. She wants to address this immediately. Andrew hired Richard Blackwood, Marcus asked, bringing in a box of surveillance gear. Blackwood was an expensive shark. The kind you hire when you liquidate something big. I felt the flutter of concern, but Rebecca's steady hand on my shoulder calmed me. Blackwood might be good, she said, but he couldn't argue with video evidence and financial records, and he was walking into all of this cold. We'd had 8 months to prepare. Marcus hooked his laptop to the suite TV and pulled up the surveillance from our home. I've compiled the highlights, Marcus said. Fair warning, Amanda, this isn't easy to watch. The first clip showed Andrew in his study at 2 in the morning. 3 weeks ago, I'd been asleep upstairs, knocked out by the sleeping pills he'd begun suggesting I take for my anxiety. On screen, Andrew carefully photographed documents from our safe before putting them back exactly as they were. They weren't just any papers. They included our joint investment portfolios, my mother's power of attorney forms, and the deed to the lake house my grandmother had left me. He's been building duplicates, Valentina explained, her voice calm but sharp, forgeries with subtle changes. If you hadn't caught this, he could have replaced the originals piece by piece. The next clip was worse. Andrew and Nadia in our living room 2 months ago. The same night he told me he was at a client dinner. She was lounging in my silk robe from our honeymoon in Paris, laughing at something on his phone. Turn it up, I said, even though my stomach turned. Andrew's voice filled the room. She actually believed me when I said the conference was mandatory. I've trained her well. A few more months and I'll have everything transferred, then we can stop this charade. Nadia's giggle was like glass shattering. The prenup really says she gets nothing. The prenup's irrelevant, Andrew sneered. She'll never fight. Amanda doesn't have the spine. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll be in Costa Rica. She'll be too broken to do anything. Marcus paused the video. The room was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city. Somewhere out there, Andrew was probably tearing through his office, realizing his bank access was gone, wondering why everything was collapsing. There's more, Marcus said quietly. Do you want to see it? I need to know everything. The next clip showed Andrew pacing in the garage, phone pressed to his ear, time-stamped last Tuesday while I'd been at my book club. She has no idea, he whispered, her mother's Alzheimer's. The trust fund their father set up. It's nearly 2 million. Amanda doesn't even know it exists. My knees almost gave out. Jennifer, my younger sister, the one I'd shielded from her gambling debts, the one I'd covered for with our parents more times than I could count. She'd been feeding him information about my family, about money I didn't even know existed. When did he contact her? I whispered. Valentina pulled up phone records. First contact 13 months ago. Regular calls started 10 months ago. Always when you weren't home. He's been paying off her debts in exchange for information. Rebecca glanced at the clock. We need to leave for court in 30 minutes. Amanda, are you ready? Show me the rest first. Marcus clicked another folder. These are from his office computer. My IT contact pulled them before his access was cut this morning. Emails filled the screen. Andrew and his attorney, dating back 6 months. Subject line: Project Fresh Start. Inside were detailed plans for divorcing me, psychological tactics to make me doubt myself, financial maneuvers to strip me bare, even suggestions to escalate emotional abuse so I'd be too broken to resist. One line stood out: the key is to make her believe she's going crazy. Gaslight consistently, hide things. deny conversations, contradict memories. By the time we file, she'll be too unstable to fight effectively. I thought of every time he'd told me I was misremembering. The dinner reservation he claimed I never made, the conversations about visiting my parents that he swore hadn't happened, the jewelry that vanished and later reappeared in odd places. I'd even started writing things down. Secretly terrified I was losing my mind. He was following a playbook, Rebecca said darkly. Douglas N., his attorney, he specializes in high-net-worth divorces where one spouse gets left with nothing. He's already under investigation by the bar for ethics violations. Valentina pulled up one final document. This triggered our emergency filing. Yesterday afternoon Andrew transferred $3.2 million from his hedge fund's client accounts into a personal account in Panama. Right before he abandoned you, the pieces snapped into place. So it wasn't just about control, I said slowly. He knew something was closing in. Rebecca's eyes flicked with satisfaction. The SEC received an anonymous tip yesterday morning about irregularities in his fund's reporting. I asked, Valentina. Actually, once she documented the embezzlement, we were obligated to report it. The weight of Andrew's crimes pressed down on me. This wasn't just about betrayal or an affair. He was a criminal, using me as cover while he siphoned millions from innocent investors, people who had trusted him with their futures. Judge Coleman needs to see all of it, I said. Steadying myself, every file, every recording, every piece of evidence. Rebecca smiled, the kind of smile that had carried her undefeated through every financial abuse case. She will, and Andrew Mitchell is about to learn what it feels like to lose everything. The courthouse gleamed with marble and mahogany meant to intimidate. I walked through in my sharp navy suit, the one Andrew had never seen, bought last month for this very moment. Rebecca flanked me on one side, Marcus on the other. Briefcase and surveillance gear in tow, we entered courtroom 4B at exactly 12:55 p.m. Andrew was already seated beside Richard Blackwood. His $1,000 haircut couldn't disguise the deep lines of stress. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, wrinkled clothes, shadows under his eyes. He'd clearly slept in his office. When he saw me, his face twisted from exhaustion to rage. All rise. The bailiff called. Judge Patricia Coleman swept in, her black robes commanding silence. She perched reading glasses on her nose and began reviewing the stack of documents before her. We're here for an emergency petition filed by Amanda Mitchell regarding marital assets and spousal abandonment, she said, her voice steady and authoritative. Mr. Blackwood, I see you've only just been retained. Yes. Your Honor, we request a continuance to, denied. Your client allegedly abandoned his wife in dangerous conditions last night. Time is of the essence. She turned. Counselor. Present your evidence. Rebecca rose, smooth as silk. Your Honor, at approximately 8:47 p.m. yesterday, Andrew Mitchell deliberately abandoned his wife at a rest stop 37 miles from their home during a severe storm. We have audio recording of the incident. Andrew's voice filled the courtroom, cold and undeniable. You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect. Andrew went pale. Blackwood leaned in, whispering furiously. Andrew shook his head, gesturing wildly. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, Mr. Mitchell has been systematically concealing marital assets for 18 months. We have documentation of offshore accounts totaling $8 million, plus evidence of embezzlement from his hedge fund amounting to $3.2 million. Objection, Blackwood snapped. Leaping to his feet, these are unsubstantiated allegations. Then let's substantiate them, Rebecca replied coolly, holding up binders, exhibits A through F, bank transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, all initiated by Mr. Mitchell without his wife's knowledge or consent. Judge Coleman flipped through the documents, her expression darkening. She turned to Andrew. Did you abandon your wife last night? Andrew straightened his tie. Your Honor, there was a misunderstanding. My wife and I argued, yes or no, Mr. Mitchell. I left her at a rest stop during a storm, 37 miles from home. Her brows lifted. How considerate of you. She turned back to Rebecca. Continue. Rebecca clicked the next file onto the courtroom screen. Mr. Mitchell has also engaged in an extramarital affair with his assistant, Nadia Rodriguez, funded with marital assets, gifts, trips, and a pearl necklace valued at $12,000, reported as stolen for insurance but actually given to his mistress. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "He's here." The courtroom doors opened. Tom Chin from the SEC walked in, flanked by 2 federal agents. Andrew whipped around, and for the first time I saw raw fear in his eyes. "Your Honor," Tom said, bowing slightly, "apologies for the interruption. We have a warrant for Andrew Mitchell's arrest on charges of wire fraud and embezzlement." Blackwood shot up. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. So is stealing $3.2 million from client accounts." Judge Coleman cut in dryly. She looked at the agents. "Gentlemen, wait until we conclude this hearing. Mr. Mitchell isn't going anywhere." Andrew collapsed into his chair. His phone buzzed again on the defense table, screen lit with an incoming call. After the call, I saw the names flashing on Andrew's phone: his mother, his business partner James, call after call. Given the evidence presented, Judge Coleman continued, "I'm granting the emergency injunction. All marital assets are frozen pending investigation. Mrs. Mitchell is awarded exclusive use of the marital home and temporary support of $10,000 per month. Mr. Mitchell, you are ordered to stay 500 feet away from your wife. $10,000 a month." Andrew exploded, leaping up despite Blackwood's attempt to drag him down. "That's insane. She doesn't need Mr. Mitchell." Judge Coleman cut him off. "You abandoned your wife during a storm after hiding millions in assets. I'm being generous, not holding you in contempt. Sit down." He collapsed back into his chair just as my phone lit up with Jennifer's name. I declined the call. She called again. And again. Rebecca leaned closer. "Document those." I took screenshots. 17 calls from Jennifer in the last hour, 43 from Andrew since last night, 22 from his mother Margaret, and even a handful from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably his colleagues or panicked clients who'd already heard whispers of the federal investigation. Tom Chin stepped forward while the judge finalized her orders. "Mrs. Mitchell, we'll need your cooperation in our investigation. Your attorney mentioned you have additional evidence." 8 months' worth, I replied. "Financial records, recordings, emails, everything." "Good," he said. "Your husband's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted on all charges." Andrew must have overheard, because he suddenly shot to his feet, pointing at me. "You did this. You set me up. This whole thing was a trap, Mr. Mitchell." Judge Coleman's gavel came down like thunder. "Control yourself, or I'll add contempt charges. She's been planning this." Andrew raged, his voice cracking, his composure gone. "She knew I was going to leave her there, so you admit to abandoning her?" the judge asked coolly. Andrew froze. Blackwood yanked him back into his chair, but the damage was done. Andrew had just confessed in open court, in front of federal agents, to deliberately abandoning me. The courtroom doors burst open. Nadia stumbled in, her designer dress wrinkled, her carefully styled hair falling apart. She scanned the room until her eyes locked on Andrew. "You said you were divorced," she shrieked. "You said the papers were already filed." Andrew's face went slack. "She's crazy. She's making things up." The judge sighed. Remove yourself from my courtroom." But Nadia wasn't leaving. She pulled out her phone and waved it in the air. "I have texts, recordings. He promised me we were getting married. He told me the money was his." Tom Chin's eyes lit up. He strode forward carefully. Would very much like to speak with you." Andrew's destruction was complete. His mistress was turning state's evidence. His assets were frozen. Federal agents were waiting to arrest him, and his carefully crafted image had collapsed in less than an hour. As we walked out, leaving Andrew to be processed by agents, my phone buzzed with a final message. It was from Margaret, his mother. "I hope you're satisfied. Destroying a good man over petty jealousy." I deleted it without replying. Margaret would learn soon enough. Her son wasn't a good man, he was a criminal. And I hadn't destroyed him, he'd destroyed himself. The courthouse steps were swarmed with reporters, microphones thrust toward me, cameras flashing. Someone had leaked the story. Probably a clerk who recognized Andrew's name from the financial pages. "Mrs. Mitchell, is it true your husband stole millions? How long have you been planning this? Will you press additional charges? Rebecca stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. My client will not be making any statements at this time. The federal investigation is ongoing. We pushed toward Marcus's truck. I glimpsed an evening news van setting up across the street. By tonight, Andrew's face would be on every local channel. The golden boy of Minneapolis hedge funds. Now arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Back at the hotel, I collapsed onto the counter as Rebecca poured us water. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since court. I scrolled through the messages, each one a different shade of shock or judgment. From my hairdresser, just saw the news, good for you, honey. From Andrew's golf buddy Richard, this is a misunderstanding. Right, Andrew would never. From neighbors, we always knew something was off about him. But the most intriguing message came from James Morrison, Andrew's business partner. Amanda, we need to talk. There are things about the fund you should know, things not in the federal filing. Rebecca read over my shoulder, set up a meeting, record everything. At 4 o'clock, the local news broke the story wide open. The Chiron scrolled across the screen. Prominent hedge fund manager arrested for embezzlement following spousal abandonment incident. They already had Andrew's mugshot. He looked haggard, his perfect hair undone, his designer suit replaced with jail blues. The reporter stood outside our house, my house now, describing the scandal in breathless detail. Sources close to the investigation report Andrew Mitchell allegedly abandoned his wife during last night's severe storm, leaving her stranded 37 miles from home. This morning, federal agents arrested Mitchell on charges of embezzling $3.2 million from client accounts. His wife, Amanda Mitchell, could not be reached for comment. My phone rang again. Jennifer. This time, I answered. Amanda, please, I need to explain. You told him about Mom's will, about the trust Dad set up, about her diagnosis. Silence. Then, softly, I was trying to help. He said you were too stressed to handle it. He said he wanted to protect you. He paid my gambling debts. I thought he loved you. He seemed so concerned, so caring. He said you were fragile, that you needed guidance. I thought about all the times Jennifer had called in the past year with her innocent questions. How's Mom doing? Have you spoken to her lawyer? Remember that property Dad bought in Wisconsin? Every conversation had been intelligence gathering for Andrew. He played you, I said flatly, just like he played me. Amanda, I'm so sorry. When I saw the news, when I realized what he'd done, I've been sick all day. Can we meet, please? Rebecca shook her head firmly, but something in Jennifer's voice made me pause. She sounded shattered, not just guilty. Tomorrow, I said, neutral location. You come alone. After I hung up, Marcus pulled up social media feeds. You need to see this. Andrew's company's Facebook page was imploding, clients demanding their money back, former employees posting about suspicious activity. One woman wrote, he fired me when I questioned missing funds last year. Now I know why, but the most devastating blow came from Nadia. She'd gone nuclear on Instagram, posting screenshots of their texts, photos from their trips funded with stolen money, and a long caption. Andrew told me his wife was unstable, that she refused to divorce him, that she threatened to ruin him if he left. I believed him. I was a fool. He's a master manipulator. The photos were damning. Andrew and Nadia in first-class seats to Paris, champagne flutes raised, Andrew and Nadia at the Mexican resort where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary, Andrew and Nadia in our bed. That one spread fast, even after Instagram tried to take it down. By 6, Margaret had released a statement through her lawyer. The Mitchell family is shocked by these allegations. We believe this is a coordinated attack by a vindictive spouse seeking financial gain. Andrew Mitchell is an upstanding member of the community who has been victimized by a calculating woman who married him for his money. She's really going with that, Marcus muttered, after what everyone heard in court. My phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. Against Rebecca's advice, I answered. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Patricia Hung with the Wall Street Journal. We're running a story on systemic fraud in boutique hedge funds. Your husband's case is part of a larger pattern we've been investigating. Would you be willing to share your experience? Rebecca took the phone from me. This is Amanda Mitchell's attorney. All press inquiries should come through my office." She hung up. Then turned to me. "By tomorrow, this won't just be local news, it'll be national. Andrew didn't just destroy himself. He's taking down an entire network of corrupt fund managers. The FBI is expanding their investigation." I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights somewhere in Federal Holding. Andrew was probably meeting with Blackwood, trying to figure out how to spin this. But there was no spinning video evidence, recorded confessions in millions in stolen money. My phone set up with one more message, this one from David Brennan. "Andrew, biggest client, Mrs. Mitchell. I want you to know that several of us victims are pursuing civil suits against your husband. However, be clear, you are not our target. We know you were a victim, too. In fact, we'd like you to testify about what you observed." The irony was perfect. Andrew had spent years telling me I was too stupid to understand finance, too naive to grasp business. Now his former clients wanted my testimony to help bury him, as the sun set over Minneapolis, painting the sky the color of justice. I realized that Andrew's public downfall was just beginning. Tomorrow there would be more headline, more revelations, more people coming forward with stories about the man they trusted with their money. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I sat in peaceful silence, no longer afraid of his footsteps, his moods, his cruel words designed to keep me small. The man who abandoned me in the rain had created his own storm, and now he was drowning in it. The next morning brought a knock at my hotel door that I wasn't expecting. Through the people, I saw Jennifer standing in the hallway, her usually perfect appearance completely undone. Her hands shook as she clutched a manila envelope to her chest and her eyes were red, rheumed from crying. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. I thought we agreed to meet at a neutral location. I couldn't wait. "Amanda, please, there are things you need to know right now. Before the FBI talks to me this afternoon." Mark appeared in the doorway of the adjoining room, alert and protective. I noted to him that he was okay, then let Jennifer inside. She sat on the edge of the couch, placing the envelope on the coffee table with trembling fingers. "Andrew first contacted me 13 months ago. She began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knew about the gambling. I don't know how he found out. But he knew I owed $47,000 to some very unforgiving people. He offered to pay it all, no questions asked. If I just answered some questions about our family finances and you agreed." My voice was flat, controlled. I was desperate. They were threatening to go to my employer to ruin my career. Andrew seemed like he genuinely wanted to help. He said you were too proud to ask our parents for money, that he wanted to surprise you by solving family problems, behind the scenes. She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of printed emails. "These are our conversations, every one of them. I printed them all last night when I realized what he'd really been doing." I picked up the first email, dated over a year ago. Andrew's tone was warm, concerned, brotherly, even. He wrote about wanting to be a better husband, wanting to understand my family dynamics so he could support me better. The manipulation was masterful. He was particularly interested in Mom. Jennifer continued. "He wanted to know about her health, her mental state, her finances. I thought he was planning something nice for her, maybe paying for better care. You told him about the Alzheimer's." Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. "She made me promise not to tell you. She didn't want you to worry. Said you had enough stress with Andrew being so demanding. But he was so persistent, so caring. He said he'd noticed signs and wanted to help." I kept reading. The emails showed Andrew's questions growing more specific over time. What properties did our parents own? Were there any trust? Who was the executor of their wills? Jennifer had answered everything. Believing She was helping her brother-in-law better care for our family. "Last month, he asked me to get Mom to sign some papers," Jennifer said. "He said they were for insurance purposes, that I would protect her assets if her condition worsened. I actually took them to her, Amanda. Thank God her lawyer was there that day and recognized them as property transfer documents. That's when I started to realize something was wrong." My phone buzzed. David Brennan was calling. I put him on speaker so markets could hear. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry to bother you, but this is urgent. I've been going through our client files all night. Andrew wasn't just stealing from the general fund, He specifically targeted our elderly clients, particularly widows. What do you mean targeted Mrs. Eleanor Harties, for instance? Her husband died 2 years ago. Left her everything with specific instructions that Andrew personally managed her portfolio. Within 6 months, Andrew had convinced her to sign power of attorney documents. He thought he was giving him authority to make traits. He used IT to drain her accounts. I felt sick. Alan or Hartley was 78 years old. I'd met her at several company events, a sweet woman who always talked about her grandchildren. How much did he take from her? 800,000. But here's the worst part. He convinced her he was developing memory problems, that SHE was forgetting conversations about withdrawals she'd authorized. He gaslit an elderly woman into believing SHE had dementia. Marcus was already taking notes documenting everything for Rebecca. This changed the entire scope of the case. Andrew wasn't just a white-collar criminal. He was a predator who specifically hunted vulnerable people. I have recordings, David continued. I started secretly recording our partnership meetings 2 years ago when I noticed discrepancies. I was building a case to take to the authorities, but I was scared. Andrew had connections everywhere. But now that he's already in custody, I want to provide everything I have. After David hung up, Jennifer pulled out one more document from her hope. There's something else about Dad's estate. Our father had died 5 years ago, leaving what we thought was a modest inheritance split between Jennifer and me. But the paper SHE handed me showed something different. A trust account in my name alone, established the year before he died. He knew about my gambling. Even then, Jennifer said quietly, he loved me, but he didn't trust me with money, so he set this up for you with Mom as the trustee. It's worth about $2 million. Andrew found out about IT through me, and has been trying to access IT for months. I stared at the document. $2 million my father had hidden to protect IT from both Jennifer's addiction and unknowingly for my husband's greed. The account was held at a small private bank in Wisconsin, one Andrew wouldn't have known about without Jennifer's information. We need to go see Mom. Jennifer said today she's been holding on to something for you. Something she wouldn't even tell me about, she said as she was waiting for the right moment. An hour later, we sat in my mother's room at the memory care facility. SHE was having one of her increasingly rare clear days, her eyes bright and focused. As SHE held my hand, I knew what he was the first time I met him, he said, her voice stronger than I had been in months. The way he looked at our house, evaluating everything like he was cattle-jing assets. The way he steered conversations toward money your father's saw too. He reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out a small key safety deposit box. First National Bank on Hino. Hun, your father put things there the week before he died. Documents, evidence. Evidence of what Mom Andrew tried to forge your signature last year. Loan documents, property transfers. The bank manager was your father's friend. He called me, sent me copies of everything. It's all in the box. I took the key feeling its weight. My father had been protecting me even from beyond the grave, and my mother had been standing guard over that protection despite her declining memory. There's more, Mom said, her grip tightening on my hand. The FBI came here yesterday not about Andrew's arrest, about something bigger. They said his name came up in an investigation that's been running for 3 years. A network of fund managers who've been systematically defrauding elderly clients across 5 states. The room felt suddenly airless. Andrew's abandonment of me in the rain wasn't just about control or cruelty. He'd known the FBI was closing in. He'd wanted me broken and compliant because he thought he could use me as either a shield or a scapegoat. When everything collapsed, he never expected you to fight back, my mother said, a small smile crossing her face. Men like him never do. They think kindness is weakness. They're always surprised when they learn otherwise. As we prepare to leave, my mother, squeeze my hand one more time. Your father would be proud of you. You're stronger than Andrew ever imagined. Driving away from the facility, Jennifer beside me and Marcus following in his truck, I thought about the layers of deception Andrew had built. Each revelation peeled Ed back another level of his criminality. He wasn't just a bad husband or a corrupt fund manager. He was the center of a web of financial abuse that had destroyed dozens of lives. But he'd made one fatal error. He assumed that the woman he'd left in the rain would stay there, broken and defeated. Instead, He'd become the storm that would wash away everything he'd built on the suffering of others. The First National Bank on Henniker's did like a fortress of old money and older secrets. Jennifer waited in the car while Markets accompanied me inside, where the safety deposit box my mother had protected waited in a climate-controlled vault. The bank manager, Mr. Paulson, remembered my father well and handled the key with the reference of someone who understood he was part of something significant. Inside the box lay a stack of documents that made my hands tremble, forced loan applications with my signature dated 6 months ago. Property transfer papers for my grandmother's lake house, which Andrew had apparently tried to sell without my knowledge, bank statements from accounts never seen opened in my name, but controlled by Andrew. My father had somehow obtained copies of everything. His handwriting on sticky notes explaining what each document meant. One note attached to a forced power of attorney document simply read, "He will try to take everything. Don't let him." Marcus photographed every page while I sat in stunned silence. The scope of Andrew's betrayal, capital spending like ink spreading through water. This wasn't just about our marriage or even the stolen millions. He'd been systematically working to Erie, my financial existence, to make me completely dependent on him, or worse, to frame me for his crimes if necessary. 4 months later, I walked into the federal courthouse for the first day of Andrew's criminal trial. The media attention had only intensified since his arrest. Newsfans line. The street reporters called out questions I didn't answer. I wore a charcoal grey suit that had never seen the inside of our shared closet, bought specifically for this moment, professional, dignified, expensive enough to show I wasn't broken. Andrew sat at the defendant's table in a suit that no longer fit properly. He'd lost weight in federal custody, and his formerly perfect hair had grown out awkwardness when our eyes met across the courtroom. I smiled the same serene smile I used to give him over morning coffee when he'd lecture me about my spending, but now that smile carried the weight of everything I knew and everything he was about to lose. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Torres, laid out the case method. 12 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of elder abuse, 1 count of conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Doctor books, hidden accounts, forged documents, recorded conversations where Andrew explicit discussed stealing from clients for 11 days. Witness after witness took the stand. Elderly clients described how Andrew had convinced them to sign documents they didn't understand. Former employees testified about being ordered to falsify records. The forensic accountant walked the jury through the laboring of offshore accounts in shell companies Andrew had created. On day 12, the courtroom doors opened and native Rodriguez walked in. She looked nothing like the polished young woman who had warned my grandmother's pals. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a conservative dress, her elaborate hairstyle with a simple bien. She's been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony, and he was about to bury Andrew with it. Ms. Rodney, guess the prosecutor began. How long were you romantically involved with the defendant? 18 months. Name answered, her voice steady but quiet. And during that time, did Mr. Mitchell ever discuss his business practices with you? Yes, frequently. He thought I was amusing to explain how he was moving money around without anyone noticing. He called it playing 3-dimensional chess while everyone else played checkers. SHE produced recordings from her phone conversations where Andrew bragged about targeting elderly clients, about hiding money for me, about his plans to disappear to coastal recall once he accumulated enough in one recording. His voice clear and damning, he said, "A man is the perfect cover, sweet, trusting, asks no questions. By the time he figures out what's happening, I'll be gone and she'll be left holding the bag." But Nadia's most devastating revelation came near the end of her testimony, 3 weeks before his arrest. Andrew told me he was planning to leave me too. He had another woman in Costa Rica, someone he'd met online. He was going to abandon me just like he abandoned his wife. The look on Andrew's face was worth every moment of pain he'd caused me. His jaw dropped, his attorney frantically whispered in his ear, but the damage was done. His mistress had just revealed, Ed, that he'd been playing everyone, including her. The next day brought another shock. A young man named Christopher Walsh took the stand, 22 years old, with Andrew's same sharp jaw line and calculating eyes. The prosecutor established his identity quickly: Andrew's son. From a college relationship whose existence Andrew had hidden for over 2 decades, my mother has been receiving payments from Andrew Mitchell for 22 years, Christopher testified, $1,500 a month to keep quiet about my existence. SHE has records showing the money came from his client accounts. I watched Andrew shrinking his chair. As Christopher continued, he told my mother that if he ever contacted his family or went public, he'd destroy her reputation and ensure us he never worked in finance again. SHE has that threatened writing. The prosecutor introduced 22 years of bank records showing regular payments from the same accounts Andrew had been piling in. He had been stealing from elderly clients, not just for luxury and escape, but to hide the evidence of his past. Andrew's defense attorney tried to object, arguing this was prejudicial and irrelevant to the financial crimes, but Judge Common overruled him. It establishes a pattern of deception and financial malfeasance spending the defendant's entire adult life. On the final day of testimony, Andrew made the catastrophic decision to take the stand himself against his attorney's visible protests. He stood and walked to the witness box. Still believing he could talk his way out of this, for 2 hours, he tried to spin a narrative where he was the victim he claimed died, known about the affairs and approved. He insisted the elderly clients had authorized every transaction. He portrayed himself as a brilliant financial mind, who'd simply made some bookkeeping errors. Then the prosecutor began his cross-examination, and Andrew's composure cracked like ice under pressure. When confronted with the recordings, he claimed they were taken out of context. When shown the forged documents, he suggested I might have created them. When presented with evidence of the hush money to Christopher's mother, he actually said that was a personal matter unrelated to my business. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours as the forms start to read the verdict. I held Mark's hand on one side and Rebecca's on the other. On count 1 wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2 wires fraud, we find the defendant guilty. By the time they reached count 15, Andrew had put his head in his hands, guilty on all charges. The man who had left me in the rain 37 miles from home was about to learn what real abandonment felt like. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. Judge Coleman, the same woman who'd overseen our emergency hearing months ago, looked down at Andrew with undisguised contempt. Mr. Mitchell, you targeted the most vulnerable members of society. You betrayed the trust of clients, colleagues, and family. You showed no remorse, accepting no responsibility. Even when confronted with overwhelming evidence of your crimes, this court sentences you to 96 months in federal prison without the possibility of early release. 8 years. Andrew would spend 8 years behind bars. As the baths prepared to lead him away, he turned to me one last time. This isn't over. He melt. I stood and spoke clearly, knowing the quarter microphones would capture every word. You're right, the civil suits start next month. The bailiff led Andrew away in shackles, and I walked out of the courthouse into a September afternoon that felt like the first day of spring. The civil suits would indeed start next month, with 17 of Andrew's victims seeking restitution. But that was Rebecca's battlefield. Now I had something more important to build. The whistleblower reward came through 6 weeks after Andrew's sentencing, $1.2 million for providing information that led to the recovery of stolen funds, combined with the assets the court awarded me and the trust fund my father had protected. I suddenly had the resources to do something meaningful with the pain Andrew had caused. Markets found the building first, a renovated Victorian in mini application with your neighborhood that had previously housed a law firm. 3 stories, 8 offices, a conference room large enough for group sessions, and most importantly, multiple something women escaping dangerous situations would need. We signed the lease on a Thursday. By Monday, the Phoenix Foundation had its home. We need proper security systems, Marcus said, walking through the empty rooms with his tablet, making notes, panic buttons in every office, secured entry surveillance that actually protects people, instead of monitoring them. Valentina arrived with boxes of filing systems and encryption software. I've already had 3 forensic accountants reach out wanting to volunteer their services worth spreading in the financial community about what we're doing. Rebecca had taken a leave of absence from her practice to help establish our legal aid program. We need to be careful about how we structure this, he said, spreading incorporation documents across the conference table. We're going to be dealing with dangerous situations. Angry spouses, potential legal retaliation, everything has to be bulletproof. Within a month, we had our first client, Maria, a teacher whose husband had hidden their savings and threatened to report her to immigration services if he tried to leave, even though he was a citizen volunteer. Found the money Rebecca filed, the papers markets, arranged safe transportation. I sat with Mario while She cried, remembering my own tears in that hotel room the night Andrew abandoned me. Jennifer arrived at the foundation on a rainy Tuesday, 3 months sober and carrying a box of donuts as a peace offering. I want to help, he said simply. I know what it's like to be manipulated to be so desperately you betray people you love. Maybe I can help others see the signs before it's too late. We started her as a volunteer, answering phones and filing paperwork, but Jennifer had a gift for talking to women who called in crisis. She understood desperation and shame in ways that even trained counselors sometimes missed. Within 6 months, he was running our support groups, sharing her story of how Andrew had exploited her addiction to gather information, helping others recognize when they were being used. My mother came to visit on one of her clear days, Marcus, driving her carefully through the city sheet, once known so well. She sat in my office, looking at the framed photos on the walls. Women who given permission to share their success stories, faces beaming as they stood in front of new apartments at graduation ceremonies with children they'd managed to keep safe. Your father would be so proud, he said, touching a photo of a woman who escaped with 3 children and was now in nursing school. He always said the best revenge against cruelty was kindness to others. She pulled out an envelope from her purse. This came to the house. I thought you should see it. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the prison newsletter. Andrew had been elected treasurer of the inmates' investment club. Even behind bars, he was trying to maintain his image as a financial genius. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The surprise volunteer came 7 months after the trial. Nadiri Guest stood in our reception area looking nothing like the woman who'd worn my grandmother's proles. Sed cut her hair short, traded designer clothes for simple slacks and a button-down shirt, and carried herself with a humility I'd never seen before. I've been in therapy, She said, sitting across from me in my office, working through how I got involved with someone like Andrew, why I ignored the red flags, why I participated in hurting you. I know I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can prevent other young women from making my mistakes. She started by speaking at colleges, warning business students about older men in power who promise career advancement in exchange for companionship. She was brutally honest about her own choices, taking responsibility, while also explaining the gradual manipulation that made those choices seem reasonable at the time. He made me feel special, She told a group of graduate students one evening, like I was smarter and more sophisticated than other women my age. By the time I realized I was just another victim in his game. I was in too deep to see the exit. 1 year after Andrew's sentencing, a letter arrived at the foundation. His handwriting was still perfect, even on prison, stationery, 4 pages of ventral blaming me for his downfall, claiming I'd orchestrated everything from the beginning, that I didn't trapped him. He listed every perceived slight, every moment he now realized had been part of my plan. The final line read, "I hope you learned your lesson." I had the letter professionally framed and hung on my office wall right next to my degrees and certifications. When clients asked about it, I told them the truth. Yes, I had learned my lesson. I'd learned that when someone shows you who they are through their cruelty, believe them. I'd learned that patience and planning could overcome years of abuse. Most importantly, I'd learned that the best response to someone trying to break you is to become unbrokenly. Then use that strength to lift others. 18 months after that night, at the rest stop, I stood in my office looking at a wall covered in thank you cards. 87 women had found safety through the Phoenix Foundation. Some had needed just legal advice in financial forensic. Others had required complete extraction plans, safe houses and new identities. Each one had arrived broken in some way, convinced they were trapped, that their situation was hopeless. Eleanor Hartley. The widow Andrew had become our biggest donor. Schutt recovered most of her money through the civil suits and insisted on funding our emergency shelter program. That man tried to convince me I was losing my mind, SHE said, at our fundraising gala. Amanda showed me I was actually finding my strength. The rain was falling again outside, drumming against the windows of the Victorian that housed hopes in second chances. I thought about that night, 37 miles from home, standing in the downpour while Andrew drove away. Confident he'd broken me, he thought he was teaching me about power and control, about knowing my place. Instead, he taught me that cruelty creates its own destruction, that every action has consequences, and that sometimes the person you abandoned in the rain has already seen the storm coming and prepared accordingly. Through the Phoenix Foundation, his act of calculated cruelty had become the catalyst for saving women he never believed deserved saving. The ultimate lesson, the one Andrew never saw coming, wasn't about obedience or respect or knowing one's place. He was about transformation. He tried to leave me powerless in a storm. Instead, I'd become the shelter. If the story of calculated justice kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Amanda stood in court wearing the sharp suit Andrew always said made women look too aggressive, and smiled at him with the same serene expression SHE used to give him over breakfast. What was your favorite moment of sweet revenge? Drop IT in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Well, that's all for today's story. If you like this video, please subscribe. We will continue to update more exciting stories and look forward to seeing you next time.